We ready to go? Everyone sitting comfortably? Great. Okay. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Writers' Block. Welcome to those of you who are joining us on the Zoom room today. It's great to see you here. And welcome to those who are joining us live stream on YouTube, which is incredibly exciting. So today on the Writers' Block, we have our block party, the highlight really of the 3-week residency. So for those of you who are new to the Writers' Block, I will just say it's the UK's, we believe, first dedicated online space to the support of writers, the support of new writing, where those writers get to work with an incredible array of professional writers and spoken word artists. And the block party really is the most exciting part of that. It's a perfect end to the week and the start to the weekend, because it's the event where we get to hear the incredible new work that has been produced during the 3-week residency by our writer on the block, as we tend to call our guest writers. And so I'm really looking forward. Not only will we hear from new writers, but we will also hear from our writer in residence, new work from our writer in residence this afternoon. And our writer on the block has been the multi-award winning, multi-talented, bilingual and incredibly prolific writer and talented Manon Steffan Ross. So could you give a lovely virtual welcome to Manon, please?
Thank you.
Manon, just for those who don't know, Manon's been a guest and a great supporter of Writing on the Wall for a long time now. So we haven't seen much of her with lockdown and everything else, but it's just great to see you and have you back with us at Writing on the Wall, Manon. And the Writers' Block really is a new initiative that was created particularly to respond to the COVID situation, the lockdown situation, and to keep people connected and engaged, and most of all creative in what's been a very, very difficult period for all of us. So just how have you found being on the block, Manon? But you never thought you'd do that, Fraser. How have you found being on the block?
Surprising on every level. I think I kind of wasn't sure how it was going to work, not being actually there present with other people in the room. And my experience of Zoom so far in various lockdowns and with various different jobs is I just find it quite difficult to connect, because it's so easy to just walk off at the end, and then it takes time to reconnect with what you're doing. But actually I think it just worked so well, and I think it's true of everything I've done with Writing on the Wall, but maybe particularly true of the Writers' Block residency is that I feel that I've benefited so much from doing it, and I've approached, I think, every single session with kind of a nervousness and thinking, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, because you're so dependent on the participants. If people don't react to you, if they don't want to take part, you have no session, you have no sharing. And it's been really lovely that people have been so open to creativity and open to sharing and just to having a conversation, really.
I'm getting lovely feedback through saying you were in the chat, saying you were fantastic in the workshops. So you've had workshops, you've had one-to-one engagement sessions. Now you work across the genres, really. You're a novelist, you're a playwright, do a bit of poetry, and you write for the gaming industry as well. Incredibly versatile. What kind of genres have you been supporting people on during this 3-week residency? What kind of writing have you been looking at?
Well, mostly fiction. People have sent in mostly fiction, and the workshops I've done have generally led to kind of flash fiction or short stories, or just the sort of sparking of an idea, and for the writers to be able to explore later whether they want to carry on with that idea. But also, I've read more poetry this week than I've read in many, many years, and I've really enjoyed that kind of challenge for me personally, because every time I've had a one-to-one where the work I've received has been poetry, I've kind of had to say, well, I'm not really a poet, but it's still really useful, I think, for one creative person to have a conversation with another creative person. And it's not, I don't think anyone is more qualified than another person to give advice about the creative process. But when you're given this opportunity to have a conversation with another person about it, who is kind of on the same road as you, although they might be slightly further down the road or not, it's just really, it's wonderful. It's wonderful for me.
Lovely. And shortly we're going to hear from some of the people that you've worked closely with over the residency, and I'm really looking forward to that. But in terms of, we've asked you to produce, some original work, especially for the Writer's Block and for Writing on the Wall. How's it been for you in terms of the creative process, being asked to produce in this kind of environment?
Difficult, I think, putting myself under a lot of pressure, and it's sort of been there in the back of my mind throughout the whole thing. I'm going to have to kind of create something, and that's not usually the way I go about it. I just sort of get an idea myself and write it down. But it's been really lovely because I've written a piece of flash fiction, because that's what I write maybe more often than anything else, and I've kept it quite light. But it's just I think a part of my appreciation of all the different people, because what's really odd about Writing on the Wall, and that's different to really everything else that I do, is that whenever I step away from a course and when something comes to an end, I feel like I've made loads of new friends. And that is definitely the feeling that I'm getting now, is that, actually next week I'm gonna really miss you all. So yeah, I've tried to kind of feed that into what I've written.
That's brilliant, because the Bloc is as much about making connections as it is about and helping people to feel connected, as much as it is about the writing. But saying that, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have produced, your flash fiction. So yeah, I'm going to just hand it over to you, and let's hear your work, Manon.
Okay. So just to give a little bit of explanation, every time I've done sessions on this residency and with the Writer on the Block, I've always sat in this chair, which is my study at home, and it looks out over the middle of the town. It's very busy. You've probably all heard tractors and lorries while you've been chatting to me. And so, yeah, that just made me think that I've got a massive big window here whilst I've been chatting to you. In the cloying, kind heat of an isolated summer, I witnessed life through windows. A double layer of plastic glazing separated me from life's parade. The tall man walking his silent dog, the crows watching from a telegraph pole, the drug dealer in the bus stop opposite, self-consciously hooded and waiting. None of them saw me. I had become an unremarkable part of my locality. And then, in that clinging, suffocating heat, there came a new window. A screen, wide and long, a part of my laptop, yes, but suddenly someone else, another place, a different feeling. Its faces smiled back at me. When I asked it a question, this new window did not choose to be mute. It replied to me. My new window showed me 4 a.m. in Washington State. It shared the long, low whiz of the Pope mobile rushing through a city too busy to bless. It showed me a poet in the intensive care unit of a hospital, the long, grey, fuzzy horizon of an Irish island. My new window showed me a community and friends and writers. It showed me life. In the cloying, kind heat of an isolated summer, I witnessed other lives through my new window and the ever-changing light of brand new stories. Thank you, Diolch. Oh, it's really weird to read to a screen though.
I know, but we're all here and we were all listening intently, and I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say we enjoyed it incredibly. A beautiful piece of writing, Manon. And your street sounds like an incredibly entertaining place to be looking at. But it's also lovely that we've opened up new worlds. Yeah,
I think it's been a lot of it's been for me personally on a really personal human level, an opening up from after lockdowns, and just realizing that, oh gosh, yes, there's the world is still out there and we can still have conversations, and you know, Writer on the Block has kind of, if this was happening physically in Liverpool and we were there, half of the people I've met, I wouldn't have been able to meet them because they're not from Liverpool, and I might not have been able to go myself because I'm not from Liverpool. So it's really kind of opened up the world in a really unexpected way for me.
Yeah, I mean that you know, there has been positives to the situation that we find ourselves in, and particularly positives for Writing on the Wall, in that we have been able to work with writers from across the globe and bring in audiences from across the globe. So, you know, although we've been isolated in our own homes to some extent, we've been making much more global connections. So, yeah. And I love that you picked flash fiction. I love flash fiction as a form. I think it's one of the most accessible forms of writing, isn't it? Because well, if you're anything like me, I've got a really short attention span, so I get distracted very easily. So
yeah, I think
it's perfect. But I think anybody can feel that, okay, you know, the length of flash fiction can vary from place to place and people to people, but, you know, roughly 500 words. Yeah, I can do 500 words. And yeah, so I do. I think it's a very democratic form of writing, really.
And I think it's perfect for this kind of media as well. I think I'm sure I've bored everyone here by telling them how difficult I find short story writing. Just find that length really, really hard to get to grips with. I far prefer to write a whole novel than a short story. But I just think it's a really useful length of time to read out to somebody without giving them too much of an opportunity to tune out.
So one question I have, did you write that in Welsh?
No,
or
no,
you
I
wrote
didn't.
it straight in the English?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, lovely. Or I would have said you can also read it in Welsh if you would like to do that.
I'm afraid I don't have that.
No, don't you worry. Okay, so thank you for that. We feel incredibly honoured whenever writers write specifically for the Bloc, and your piece was particularly beautiful and evocative, and very complimentary as well. So thank you for that, Manon. And now I'm going to hand over to you to host the next part of our block party, where we will hear more new and original pieces.
Lovely. Thank you, Madeleine. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to write and to read my own work as well. So yeah, we're going to be hearing a bit from the participants now, and I'm really excited about this bit. So I've got really short introductions to the writers because I think you just want to hear them writing. You don't want to hear me talking about them that much, but saying that we are starting with someone who's been a really constant and wonderful presence throughout these 3 weeks. Aaron, who's a poet, and his ability to write sort of arresting rhythmic poetry seemed to pour out of him. However vague the prompts, I remember I gave a prompt the other day and he read his work and it would just come straight out and it was absolutely brilliant. I could never have written that. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing and to hearing what you have to share, Aaron.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will read one of the prompts and then something a bit longer from the colours, from the prompt of colours. Actually, no, I'll tell you what, I was actually coming home to disappointments. This was written after the Eurovision final thing. No, Euro football final things, I don't really follow it, but I follow the poetry. Coming home to disappointment. The worst thing in school, music introduced to. An orchestra paid a visit, too young and thoughtlessness. Body cells were dancing, asked for volunteers to conduct orchestra. Can't remember what happened, but know they shared their power. Walking home, not from school lunch, still bouncing from vibrations. There is a future leading orchestras, wanting to own Berry. Art as a friend today. Classical instrumentation, parts of a puzzle thought broken. Waltz through unlocked front door. Halt in shoes. Announce Mama declaring panache. The savage beast in emergency panic shot down the world to me in a widowed matriarchal fury. Returned to a stage, felt the boards, still warm, but no vibrations, pockets empty. And this was written over the weekend. That you like this one, it's quite long, so I should have read this one first. Question H. What begins with H that isn't heaven or hell? First place is here, but not what looking for. What begins with H and brings heaven with hell? That's heroin, but never an equation. What begins with H that isn't the words heaven and different from hell? Gave a try of hereafter, but where does that start? What are points if not being in the present until future? What begins with H and is neither words hell or the reversed heaven? Could only be heaviest to carry on shoulders both those concepts. Order maintained planet across, if never revealed exact numbers of boxes orbit from juggling. What begins with H and isn't opposites by face, actions or choice taken? Oh, those are hostages. No matter how far run, it still encloses in. What begins with H and not extension of love and hate? That's happening. If not that, could be here. No other case, it could be hope or maybe healthy. Left open, hello. Tried closing, hurting. Scale motionless at humongous. Injection could bring humor. Still testing proves hermaphrodite. Acceptance stems from being hunted. What begins with H and isn't word describing heaven, hell, harmony, hatred, not a place name or a state of existence. Physical determined began with the H letter up front to describe something touchable in actuality. What began reached conclusion. There is no word beginning H, meaning things coming to end. It's always hurry. Ignore the hailing. Keep what owned for happiness from other people without hush. The game stopped, winner handed, prize of cause, showers hallowing, built on power from their holdings, suspicion just chalked to happenstance. Conclusion leads direction to just halt. And one very quick one. A challenge, it comes back to like a conversation we had with Manon that'll probably go over everyone else's head, but never mind, count them all. 20 words summer. Reachless, obscured from bloomed leaves now. Sun beat down and tolerated until worked out powers. Continually longing for one's gone. I've had a fantastic time, man, and thank you very much for your support. And thank you all for writing on the wall and Writer's Block. If any of you out there on YouTube are looking at this, do get involved with it. It will just completely, you'll never be the same person again. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. That was fantastic. God, I can't. Oh, I don't know what to say. It's just so wonderful to hear you read your work and the lines that just jump out. Art is a friend today, and the clarity of the ideas in your words. They take us somewhere. Yeah, they root us, and that's a real gift. So thank you so much, and thank you for being so generous with your work. To follow that, we have Patrick Graham. Now, Patrick's presence has been an absolute blessing throughout these 3 weeks. A writer who I feel writes kind of many different types of work and different types of creative writing, but also has his own voice that I think is a really kind of powerful voice. And again, he's so generous with his readers, and there's a real authenticity to what he shares. I particularly loved the Pope Mobile story. That was really wonderful. So I'm really looking forward to see what you've got to share today with us, Patrick.
Thank you for that great introduction, Manon, and I'll jump straight into this. I'll give it a title. It's an extract of a story that I'm working on for children called Aziza and Aringo, and it goes like this. In a land not so far away, in fact, this land was closer than you could have ever imagined. In order to get to this land, all you needed was to use your imagination. Well, not only your imagination, but there was something else you needed, and that was the help of the Aziza. The Aziza were great helpers of people, which they did in return for the help they once received from young children, who are the true and only believers that the Aziza are real. These boys and girls had once helped them fight off menacing trolls and ogres who roamed the land. They were eventually driven back and promised never to trouble the Aziza ever again, but so far they have kept that promise for thousands of years. One day, while playing at the edge of the forest, close to his home on the edge of the Okomu National Park, Aringo was playing his favourite game, pretending to be an explorer and adventurer, discovering new lands and people. He loved to play these games with his friends, but today, Aringo was alone, or that's what he thought. I know, today I will travel and find a new land and meet its people, Aringo said. He set off deep into the forest, further than he was allowed to go, as his mother and father always told him not to go past the stream at the end of their land because the forest was much thicker there and it was easy to get lost. However, as Aringo decided he wanted to explore the forest and find a new land and people, he ignored his parents' warnings and crossed over the stream. Aringo gathered some fruits that grew in his garden and he set off to begin his game of imagination and adventure. As he reached the stream, he thought to himself, I know I should not go past here, but I will make sure I don't go too far into the forest. I know mother and father think I will get lost, but I am an adventurer, and that means I have to explore new places. Rolling up his trousers and taking off his shoes, he waded across the shallow stream, and once on the other side, he declared, I am Aringo, king of the Aringa people, and I have come to your land to see how you live and to tell you stories of my adventures fighting monsters. Ringo walked a little and noted that the ground beneath him was soft and made no noise with each step he took. The trees were much closer together and the stream ran silently as he gazed back every few steps he took. Excited by this new land to explore, Ringo did not even notice that he could no longer see the stream as he continued to look back. Night was mixed with day by the way the thicket played and moulded the light that was strong enough to force its way through the green leafy walls of this forbidden place. Noticing a small branch that had fallen up to the forest floor, Ringo picked it up. "This will be a great sword," he said. "Now all I need is a shield." He then saw the piece of tree bark. "Yes," he said, picking up the bark. "This is just the right size for my shield." Ringo began to sneak about, hiding behind fallen trees and bushes, quickly darting from one to the next and using his sword to cut down any leaves that were in his way. "Come out, King of the Ogres," he shouted. "You cannot hide from me. I know you are there, as I've been following your footprints, and you're trapped by me and my men." Dashing out quickly from behind a bush, Ringo attacked the tree, pretending it was the Ogre King. After 2 swings of his sword, he shouted, "Give up, Ogre King. You're no match for me. My sword is magic and my shield is too strong for you to smash with your hammer. If you return the treasure you stole from my queen, I will let you go home." There was fallen fruit from a nearby tree and he collected this together. "That's good. I have all the treasure in a neat pile," he said. "After fighting and defeating the Ogre King, it's made me tired. I think I'll rest." And he sat down on a large tree trunk. "Ogre King, I will let you live and you can go back to your land. Go now before I change my mind," he shouted. And then he lay down on the tree trunk and laughed. "You're very strong," a voice said softly, which made Ringo jump to his feet, and he picked up his sword and shield. As he looked about, there was no one he could see. "Who said that?" Ringo asked. "Who's there?" "Don't be afraid. I mean you no harm," replied the voice. "Then come out, stop hiding," Ringo said, waving his sword ready for battle. "You're brave, fighting off the Ogre King, but I do not wish to fight." "I will tell on you when I get home," he shouted, and he began to run. He tripped and fell face down into the forest floor. "I will not hurt you. I only want to play," said the voice. Ringo could now see who the voice belonged to, and his mouth opened wide in amazement as hovering in front of his face as he lay on the ground was a tiny, beautiful girl with wings like an insect. She was dressed in the brightest colours of the rainbow and carried a small bag on her side and was no bigger than the length of his hand. "Are you really flying? And who are you?" "I'm an Aziza, and my name is Aziza, and you are a Ringo." "How do you know my name?" "I watch you play many times. I like your game so much. I always wish I could play too." "Are you a real Aziza? I never thought I would ever meet one," he said, climbing to his feet. "I've heard many bedtime story adventures of the Aziza that my father told me. I will take you to see real ogres and trolls, and you can have the greatest adventure. Would you like that?" "Yes, yes, please. I would love to go," Ringo said excitedly. "First, promise that you will listen to your mother and father and never cross the stream, because you can get lost so easy in this forest." And that's it. And thanks to Manon, because I discussed this piece on my one-to-one session, and there was a little extra bit that I put in there, the description after he passed the stream, which I think really works well. And I just made up with the advice. I could go on. It's a whole new story about the sessions we've had over the last few weeks, but it's been brilliant, and it's advanced my writing wonderfully. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank you ever so much. Thank you for sharing. Do you know what? I could listen to you read all day. I'm going to really miss your voice, Patrick. There's something so rooted and ancient about that story, but it also feels really fresh and kind of fits into our reality now. I told you before, I can really imagine reading that to my children and enjoying it as much as they would. And that thing that you've done so cleverly of that part when he's crossing the stream, that we as a reader are going, uh-oh, but we're taking a different journey to him because he's just excited about it and we're worried. So that's a really clever way. And I'm trying to figure out how you've done it and I can't work it out. So well done. Thank you ever so much, Patrick. And again, thank you for being and generous enough to share your work as well. I really appreciate it. Now, next is Sheila. Sheila has been an absolute joy throughout these 3 weeks, and her work has transported me to another landscape with her touching, gentle and lovely writing style. And Sheila herself is just such a wonderful character, full of enthusiasm and passion for her work, but also a very gentle and giving and kind person and writer. That's really reflected in her writing, as you will probably hear now. So thank you very much, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Manon. Thank you for so much. That's all I say. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read an extract from a piece that I began when this residency began. Okay, here we go. I have, the working title is The Piano Player, but that could change. Shirpra was born here, and as she would say herself, knew every gap and whinbush, thorns and all, that held its hidden story. She was doing her PhD, mapping the changes that had occurred over the past 100 years. After our usual greeting, she pointed behind me, nodding. Have you seen that? Come on, let's walk, she said, as we headed towards the cliff along the water's edge, Shirpra and Shadow paddling in the water. I noticed the house that I had passed on my way, a traditional stone-clad cottage, but from here it was different. A 3-tiered glass structure attached to the traditional building jutted out and down over the cliff face. I stood with my mouth open, my hands helping me speak. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Are they local? I asked. No, man made his money from oil. Dirty money, some people call it, others liquid gold. And planning? Hey, money has always found loopholes, or those who could be bought. People like that see the demise of the banks, buy up every piece of land and property they can get their hands on, doesn't lose its value. And to think that us Egypts bear the brunt of the taxes and the pollution of the environment, I said. Yep, and people don't see through it. Some things don't change. I shake my head, partly in disbelief, partly in anger and frustration. They're the new 21st century landlords. Lease the land back to the neighbours of those who sold it, she continues. You'd think the people here would know better because of their history, I said. Greed, like oil, can seep into the smallest of crevices, Shirpra reflected. Have you been in the house? What's it like inside? Ha, you're curious, aren't you? Shirpra said, looking sideways at me. No lowly local mortal will be invited across that threshold, I assure you. But I'm sure there will be those who will wangle their way in. She paused. Will you be one of those? I knew she was trying to rise me and didn't take the bait. Do you get the feeling, I said, of being watched? It wouldn't surprise me, Shirpra responded. There was a breeze coming from the west, the kind of breeze that does not distort the sound it carries. If I wasn't mistaken, the music that wafted from above and to the left of us was Shostakovich Piano Concerto No. 2, but with a lilt, as if the breeze had blown through it. It wasn't just a piece of music, having played it many times at home. No, it was the clarity and sweetness of the piano that interested me. And the pianist, at one with their instrument, gave the music a shimmering quality. I wonder if it's a recording. If it is, it's damn good. Concert quality, I'd say. Shirpra shook her head and laughed. Story is, she said, your man brought the piano here, rented a private yacht from wherever he was living abroad, hired a machine to winch it up into that glass room. A concert brand, if that makes any sense. You're joking, I said. And the pianist? Yes, he buys that in too, only the best from what I hear. Sure is, I said. Knew someone once who played like that. Was invited to play with orchestras all over the world. Had his own music label. I didn't know you moved in those circles, Shirpra replied. He and I were in music school together. He went into performance and won scholarships to study with the best music teachers in the world. We lost touch with one another after some time. And you, Schaefer continued? We were lovers, you see. I've never shared this with anyone. I didn't have the courage to go with him, though he wanted me to. So I played it safe, as I thought, and became a music teacher. Why didn't you go with him if you loved him? I was afraid of coming out, afraid I'd be rejected by family. So you did the safe thing, got married, Schaefer prompted. Since you put it that way, yes. Another young teacher of the school. Everyone thought we were perfect for one another, including my parents. No one knew the truth. After a while, I didn't either. Living a lie is a curse. I blame myself for Thomas' death. I was so preoccupied with myself. I wasn't there for him. I did my best. Schaefer reached out and put her hand on my shoulder. Hey, life isn't fair, she said. We do our best. The curse is in the questioning or doubting our decisions. If we cannot change it, then we just move on. We both sat quietly for a while. The music had stopped. I felt a weight had been lifted and glad I had Schaefer for a friend. She had become like a younger sister. She didn't hold back, which I liked about her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh, God, it's so lovely. I've just got so much admiration because I'm kind of keeping an eye on the chat box and I'm seeing that everyone is just picking out lines from what you've written and just saying how wonderful it was. And I thought, oh, this one was particularly touching for me. The kind of breeze that does not distort the sound it carries. I'm so jealous that you wrote that and I didn't. I'd love to stick that in a novel. But it's really clever the way that you can write those lines, but that it also doesn't distract from the pace of your writing. So it doesn't distract the movement of the story at all. And the way that you write humans and people and relationships as part of the landscape of the location which you're writing is wonderful. I just want to carry on reading that now. Everyone wants to know what happens next. So thank you for your work and thank you for sharing, Sheila. Much appreciated. Now we're moving on to Jane. And Jane did something really unexpected for me. I read what she had sent in for the one-to-one and it was something completely new for me and I was trying to work out what it was. And it's the way that Jane uses sound within her writing. So she writes beautifully and sound is a really important part of Jane's writing for me. And the way she uses that silence and is really careful and gentle with the way she uses it, but it's so impactful too. The way that her creative writing leads the writer into a kind of a silent, passive-aggressive battle. It's so hard to write that because there's no big shouting, there's nothing out there. And yeah, I came away from reading that part. It unsettled me for a long time. So yeah, it's a job well done, Jane, I think. I'd love to hear your work.
Thank you, Manon, and thank you so much for your generosity. I really enjoyed our one-to-one to such an extent that I condensed the story we discussed and I've submitted it for a flash fiction competition.
Oh, brilliant.
So yeah, it was a big, brave step. So I thought I'd read something slightly different today, but it started with a piece of free writing that we did with Writing on the Wall in January. I was part of a writing group there, and it's actually been picked up to be published in a short story anthology about Liverpool by Smithdown Social in the autumn. But it touches on all those themes about female identity and power. And in this story, this excerpt of the story, my great-grandmother speaks through the generations to me as a writer to tell me about the contributions women like her made to the Liverpool economy. So here we go. The bustling port of Liverpool, gateway to the Americas and Australasia, was world leading in the building of iron ships, which carried more cargo than their timber predecessors. The increased business propelled an expansion of the docks right up the sandy coast around the villages of Kirkdale and Bootle, attracting with them dock workers, seafarers, labourers and their families. And all those people moving into the area needed their smokes. And my mother, married as she was to a master baker at Blackledges, had enough security to open a tobacconist shop from her front room. A fine tailoress, it was a sensible step to provide items of haberdashery along with a navy cut. She was a tough, lively, resilient woman, and as a mother to 12 children, it must have taken a great deal of determination to run her own business as well. Ma Kelly knew her first priority was to provide a safe haven from which her children might fly. The King's Liverpool Regiment beckoned her boys away, and my sister and I made contributions a little differently, along with other women, making more impact to the prosperity of Liverpool than has been recognised. Now, they do say that when things get tough, the tough get going. And if Ma Kelly was tough, then I inherited all of her energy, her focus, and the shop. You needed to keep your wits about you. After all, it's the women who had to make the ends meet to keep the families going, regardless of whether there was pay coming in at the end of the week or not. It's the women who instilled aspirations in their offspring, nurturing and challenging at one at the same time, whilst their fathers were away at sea or queuing for the chance of casual labour. It's the women who had to build the community for the long term. We didn't have the alternative escape to the sea. It meant we worked steadily to broker harmony without rancour or resentment, playmakers in tough places. Of course, there were gentlefolk from the educated professional classes living in the big houses on Oriel Road who could choose not to be part of the enormous crush of people settling along the Strand. I wondered if there would be a world where my own family could raise themselves to that professional status. Down here in the community, you had to live on that native intelligence, which signals who you can trust and who you cannot within a moment of meeting them. The boxing clubs taught my brothers how to carry themselves, and they were useful street skills too. As a sister of a young man known to be handy, people didn't take the rise out of you. As I've said, the women went about life differently, building community relationships, networks of kinship and mutual support, which stood them in good stead over the long haul in the men's absence. We didn't hang dependently on our men. We set them free by shifting for our family ourselves. You see, native intelligence. In Dockland, Kirkdale, much of the work was heavily casualised piecework for labourers, stevedores and riveters. The men spent their days queuing at the pens just for a chance to be selected for work. It meant that they were away all day, and when work was tight, the little corner shops became local lifelines to those families around us. They were anchor points where people socialised, where they shared local news and bought essential supplies, increasingly for many of the poorest, on tick. It was natural to empathise with people who were barely living. Of course, many of the families in all the Shakespeare streets, that tight collection of streets perched above the Canada Dock, were my own direct family. So community, commerce and entrepreneurialism were one and the same thing. It was natural to lend to those most in need locally and to be a businesswoman and a wise woman all at the same time. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, I'm enjoying myself today. Jane, that was really lovely. Thank you so much for sharing it. And yeah, massive congratulations on being published. I'm not at all surprised now that you've read it. That's really brilliant. Please let us know when that's coming out. And please celebrate as well. Yeah, it's just the really honest, authentic feminist writing. I think the women in your writing, it's sort of, there's an unyielding strength to them always. And there's a line, it's the women who instilled aspiration in their offspring. And that really, I hadn't really thought about that before, kind of instilling an aspiration to do things that they were unable to do themselves. It's really kind of unselfish, but also resisting the self-pity of it. It's really powerful piece. And also, for me, it's a piece that documents that urban space so beautifully, and you write with such respect for the location and the fact that the location is in itself a character in the writing. It's really lovely. Makes me want to go. Makes me want to travel again. So thank you very much, Jane. Thank you for sharing too. Now we're on to Robert. Now, Robert's writing is stripped back and bare and completely transfixing. It's weeks now since, I think Robert was in one of the first groups of one-to-ones I did, so it's weeks since I read it, but it's sort of returned to my mind daily, the things that he's written. The instinctual way that he leaves just enough space for the reader to use their imagination and fill in the blanks, but he gives us just enough. And it's a really kind of mature, confident way of writing that I really, really enjoyed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got for us today, Robert.
Thanks a lot, Manon. Also for your support earlier on in the Bloc. It was fantastic. I can echo everyone else on that. It's been really good for my confidence. This is the first part of a short story, which is really about my initiation as a writer. But you never get to that bit because that's the second part. So just the first part. It's called Best Time. Sydney, summer. I can't remember when we first met. It would have been through George, though, who came into the cafe regularly in his blue shirt and chinos. He had a comfortable atmosphere around him, George, careful and reserved. Jacques was the opposite of George, brooding and intense, with a dash of Gallic charm. They were friends, though, and often together. On this particular day, George was sitting on a bar stool at his usual spot, and Jacques was standing slightly apart, leaning against the counter. We were discussing Catcher in the Rye and the merits, or otherwise, of the character of Holden Caulfield. Jacques thought Caulfield was essentially an honest person, but George disagreed. Holden's a liar, but he's an honest liar, I said, as I placed George's cappuccino in front of him. His blue eyes crinkled. Look, the point about Catcher is that it's autobiographical, I went on. Salinger couldn't stand exposing himself like that, or the criticism that the book attracted, which is why he hid himself away for the rest of his life. He wouldn't have done that if it was just fiction. Jacques looked at me when I said that, and afterwards he seemed to take to me for some reason. I must admit I was flattered, as he was a fair bit older than me and very much a man of the world. He was a dealer in Aboriginal art in a small way, and he had friends among the Aboriginals, not in Sydney, but in the outback. He'd even been invited to one of their initiation ceremonies. I was curious about that and asked him to describe it. He told me how during the ceremony, the young men had to walk from one place to another, which signified a transition of some kind, not just physically, but spiritually. I wanted to know what state of mind was needed for an initiation. I thought you'd have to fast and purify yourself, perhaps go away and meditate. But he said that for a rite de passage, all you have to do is show up. Just show up. He insisted on that, though. You just have to be there, he said. I liked it a lot when Jacques dropped in, and as I said, he was very close with George. I also discovered quite quickly that he was a fully paid-up member of the demi-monde. George would stop by in the afternoon with a newspaper or a book, but Jacques would come in at 1 o'clock in the morning with a sombrero on his head and a girl on his arm. Sometimes he'd disappear out the back door with a wink. Why did you leave through the staff door yesterday? I asked, slightly annoyed. They come in the front, I go out the back, he said, touching his nose. I had a customer waiting and turned back to my coffee machine. But after a while, I remembered a man, casually dressed and athletic, sitting by himself at one of the small tables facing the street. I hadn't given him a second thought. I certainly didn't think he was a plainclothes policeman. If anything, he was unusual in my place just because he was so nondescript. So there was much to be learned from Jacques, and I was keen to learn it. We discussed art and literature and Aboriginal culture until one night in George's attic room, with the red and blue lights of downtown Sydney shining through the skylight behind him. He tightened a tourniquet around his arm and injected himself with methamphetamine right in the middle of the conversation. George just carried on talking as though it was completely normal. From then on, though, Jacques' nighttime appearances became more erratic, and one time he asked me if I knew any dealers. "You know what I like," he said rather abruptly. I was surprised, as he wasn't normally one to ask for favours, but I promised to keep an eye out. Then came word through George that there had been a fire at Jacques' house. Everything was lost, including his collection of Aboriginal art. George looked at me sideways when he said that, as though checking to see whether I really believed it. No one was hurt, he went on, but the police had an idea that Jacques was involved and were pressing charges. The morning traffic was grinding up Oxford Street, and there was a white glare over everything when he stopped by for a coffee on his way to the courthouse. He sat at a table near the doorway, looking uncomfortable in black dress trousers and a rather surreal polka dot shirt. And in the hot sun, he looked pale and subdued. I sat down for a few minutes, but unusually we had nothing much to say. He just handed me a book titled Aboriginal Art of the Desert, sooty and blackened round the edges. I opened it, and on the flyleaf he'd written, "Dreamtime is a no man's land where we can always meet. Nice to know you, Jean." A short time later, he got up and left, and that was the last time I saw him. George came in the next afternoon. Jacques was on remand, he said. I reached under the counter for the book. Why did he sign Jean like that, I asked. And that's when I found out that he was not Jacques T. Seveno, but Jean Longley. And then George asked me to do something for Jean. He knew I was heading back home, and he asked me to meet Jean's wife, who was living in London. He reached inside his jacket and brought out an envelope. Over the countertop, his clear blue eyes held mine for a moment. Then I held out my hand, and he tipped a shower of opals into my open palm. Their iridescent colours sparkled and turned in the light. Jacques asked if you could give her these. It sounds ridiculous, I know. I don't know why he trusted me. I asked him how I could find her, and he gave me a telephone number written on a piece of paper. He said she was a writer, and her name was Ella Gray. That's it.
Thank you. That was fantastic. You see, everyone sees what I mean now. That's going to stay with all of you, and you're going to be taken back there every time. It's so clever the way that you've put so little of your narrator in there. So he's just there to carry the story, but also there is a presence there, and the way that we get to know these other characters, and you introduce us to these characters by giving us kind of seemingly random facts about them, but also it's a really effective way of building them up, and leaving us that space. I think that's the really lovely thing, is that you give us so little and so much at the same time. It's really clever writing, and I really enjoyed it. And Mary made a comment. I haven't really kept an eye on the comments, but Mary made a comment in the chat box that lovely pacing. And I think, yeah, that's what it is. It's the pace of it. It's just so perfect. It matches the story so well. The way that you've actually written the words and the way that you've put them together matches what you're trying to share so well. So thank you ever so much, Robert, and I'll look forward to reading more of that when it's published. Last but by no means least, we have Angela. Now, the other night we had a Workshare event, and I think everyone who was present at the Workshare event was absolutely stunned by what Angela had read. I think we all kind of took it away from us, and I think it's so difficult to use the gentleness and the soft to write something that has such a heavy impact. That night when Angela shared her work, I have to admit now that I kind of found it quite difficult not to cry, because it was just so impactful. there's such strength in her voice as a writer. She comes across so strong as a writer, and there's a real courage to the way that she creates atmosphere, and the courage to the way she shares with us. So Angela, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to read for us today.
Thank you so much, Manon, and thank you for being so kind and gentle and supportive. That means more than you'll ever know to somebody like me. So this was written from one of your writing prompts about colour, and it's called Father. Brushing the day from my hair, long sweeping strokes, stripping the smoke and the dull hours away. Shaft of evening sunlight seeping softly through the glass, painting the dark strands with shades of auburn light, the last gasps of a dying day, trying to catch its breath. My hair, the same colour now as yours was then, and I see you sitting there on an old tattered garden chair brazen at the end of the brick backyard, tired air aching with a bruise of purple flowers, bees swaying dizzily flower to flower, dazed, drunk on pollen. Beads of sweat on your brow trickling the crinkled skin of your face, tilted the sinking sun, eyes closed. The soft suck of your lips on a cigarette clasped between nicotine-tinged fingertips, autumn hanging heavy on your eyelids, the sting of whiskey staining the air between us, your cigarette burning a hole in the pages of memory, singeing the shape of you sitting there in the amber glow, fading to ash like the sun, like the day, like you, and I try to keep hold of you, to keep hold of the strands of your burnished hair, the colours of autumn soaked in your bones. Your hair, the copper colour of conkers and crimson skies, the crisp colour of autumn's creep across the city streets, keeps melting into gold, and I see you there, russet and ridiculous with your Elvis quiff and your turned up jeans, and the sadness seeps into bones that ache with the memory of you, sitting there while autumn sets the sky on fire above you, around you, in you, and you sinking with the sad slow seep of the sun's yellowing parched pages, your face, a pressed petal, sepia tint as we once kicked up leaves in the cool churchyard, shaded glades of ancient trees, twirling, swirling autumn colours tossed into the peep of pale blue sky, or tracing the sad face of the moon in a sky filled with stars we sat, bookends, pain filling the spaces between our words, distant as stars I revolved round you despite everything, you were the sky, and autumn breathed down your neck, set into your bones, and I didn't see it coming, didn't know how to stop it when I saw it, couldn't stop this rot from creeping into your roots and ripping you out of this life, away so fast. Plaster torn from an old wound that still seeps, it seeps and it seeps and it seeps, and I can't see you anymore, can't see your face properly. I am forgetting your face, now as you were then. Brick backyard and burnished skin, bronze ripe with the scent of the dying sun, and the smell of bins heaving heat in a city staggering on its feet, poverty etched on your face, you never knew how rich we were. To me, you walked clothed in gold, dripping from your fingers, and the sky cracked when you left. Silently, you tipped over the edge and left us, here with only the memory, the whisper of whiskey on the air when I turned my head. You left us with the kiss of a butterfly. Your breath stopped, and I stopped, and the world kept going, kept turning, and did no one see what had happened here? Why does the heart crack silently? You left with barely a sound, like the soft sigh of autumn creeping quietly, crinkling leaves, and you dropped from my life with the heavy weight of the last leaf drifting to the ground, with a sound nobody else hears, nobody else notices, but the whole forest feels its loss. Thank you.
Wow. Oh, Angela, you just write so beautifully. It's just, I started writing down the lines that touched me, and then I just thought there's no point me trying to write all these down, because it's just, every line is just so touching, and the way that you use language, it feels so instinctual to me. It's just lovely. And you know, you started with brushing the day from my hair. Just that in itself is such a powerful start, because it brings up all the senses for us. We can feel it, we can hear it, we can smell it, we can see it. A bruise of purple flowers, russet and ridiculous. It's just so hard to write such a big, complicated feeling as what you're writing about there. It's so difficult to put it into words. And, you know, some of us spend our whole careers trying to write that and kind of capture a tiny part of that feeling, and you do it, and it feels like you do it so easily. You're just brave and generous, and the work is just so touching, and it's present. It has a real presence. It's really wonderful. Thank you so much for being so strong in your vulnerability as a writer. It's a really touching thing, I think, for us all. So I really appreciate it, and thank you all for sharing. Those of you who have shared, and those of you who have taken part in any way in this in these 3 weeks. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it so much. So thank you all for your work.
Wow. What can I say? I mean, that has just been an incredible 50 minutes, and I'm really was mindful about your new window on the world, Manon. How many different worlds have we just been transported through? How many emotions, how many experiences, some very fantastical, some much more familiar to me. But the thing running throughout, I would say, is the quality of the writing, and a real evidence of dedication to the art of writing. And you used the word earlier, passion. I felt a real passion for that people have felt about their writing. So I just want to say a huge congratulations to all of those who have read today, to Aaron, to Patrick, to Sheila, to Jane, to Robert, to Angela. It's not an easy thing to be reading your work publicly, and particularly, as Manon said earlier, to a computer screen. So you all read beautifully, and those pieces are incredibly powerful. I wish congratulations to Sheila on being published, and good luck to Jane in her competition. But I think that, we will hear a lot more from these writers in the future, and I look forward to that. I think the quality of the pieces, Manon, also speaks of the quality of the support and the guidance that you have brought to the writer's block. And there's some beautiful comments in the chat, not just about you, Manon, but about all of our writers today. So I'd say have a good read of some of the feedback that's coming through in the chat. So thank you all. On behalf of all of you who attended the sessions with Manon, I'll say a big thank you to Manon. And I really look forward when we're getting together in person again. Yeah, that will be lovely. So yeah, thank you all. Just to say that our next writer on the block is Dominic Berry, and Dominic is an incredible spoken word artist. He's the winner of Spoken Word Artists in 2017, and he will be joining us live from Tuesday the 10th of August. So I really hope that you will be back on the block with us. Aaron put it perfectly, it will change your life. So to see you on the block for our next residency. Please do fill in our feedback form. That there's a link in the chat. It really is important for us to know what you like or don't like about our events, and how we can bring very enjoyable and worthwhile events to you. And finally, all that's left for me to say is thank you to everyone who's joined us in the Zoom room and on YouTube, and have a great weekend. Goodbye.